Well, hello everyone. Here to show you right here of talking about understanding about from what we do know now, and then from what we didn't know from before, and of course it could also be about from what we already know, from already. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by is toward you go ahead and ask the questions, and let's just say if you're going to be getting into the conversations with somebody talking about something, and so let's just say that if you were to start out the sentence, the question go by says toward what do you know now, that you didn't know from before. So a lot of times, every time I think about this, it sure seems that way. That the different ways of how you want to paraphrase this way of asking a question a lot of times. And so every time I think about it, I'm always thinking as to where that, okay, yeah, that, now are you really looking for any sort of clue of the matter to where that whenever you ask that question to where that, yeah, well, there's something about the situation to where that for what you know now, then compared to, okay, yeah, well, I already knew that, or that, yeah, something like, okay, well, I didn't know that, and, so a lot of times it's like, yeah, so every time you do have a conversation with somebody talking about something like that, and let's just say that, yeah, I just asked a simple question or something like that, so let's just say that if you're going to be talking to somebody, and like everybody say that, yeah, I drew this like a, yeah, if it was actual cousins talking, about cousins, and you have right here, of this example here, this tongue, sticking out right here. So it's like, yeah, you get in these conversations with somebody, and 102 is like, yeah, I don't know if you can remember, but yeah, we met once before, and so you would maybe tell somebody that we met once before on a chat, but then before we actually met at the coffee shop or something like that. So every time you do think about that source of saying right there, and you're thinking as toward it, that yeah, that there's something about for what you do know now that you didn't know from before. So it's like a lot of times, every time I think about that, it seems like to me that just a little bit, like, are you really asking a question whenever you write a sentence like that, or like, let's just say that you're just trying to look for a closure to the statement. And a lot of times it's like if we were to actually do the words in English and writing, right, and you're always want to know too that, yeah, that you go ahead and start out this, if you want to kind of call it a scenario, but still, if you were to be starting a conversation about something, and you're thinking as toward, okay, yeah, if you were to start out by saying, yeah, I know, and, so yeah, so if you were to start out by saying something like that, to where yeah, I know, and yeah, I know, did you know that from before? And yeah, I know, and so yeah, so it's like whenever you do get in those conversations, a lot of times, really with anybody, that you can say something like, yeah, I know, or yeah, I knew that, and so it's like, yeah, so it's like, so every time, if we would actually do the study of psychology right here, and 102 just a little bit, is to where that, you're trying to understand here, that, yeah, the things from what you didn't know from before to the things that you do know now, and so it's like, a lot of times it's like, yeah, well, really, it's, I did not know that. No, I did not know that. And so it's like, yeah, so half the time you're always want to know too that, whenever you do have a conversation with somebody about something, and a lot of times it's like, it's all about testing your knowledge, right? About what you know and from what you know now. And, so every time you do think about that and thinking as toward you had the conversations with somebody, and it sure seems that way that, yeah, that whenever you ask the simple questions and maybe whenever you do seek certain knowledge, right, that it seems like to me just a little bit like everybody else might say that you go ahead and ask the questions and you're just trying to get some information about something, and it's like, yeah, you go ahead and it maybe draw like a line. I'm like, oh yeah, if everybody knows what I'm talking about here, that you go ahead and from there that you go ahead and yeah, use a pencil tool right here. But well, what you go ahead and do is that you go ahead and yeah, you draw a line right here. You draw a line right here or something like that. I'm like, yeah. So it's like, so every time we do think about that, and want to know too that while you were trying to write something down for sure, you go ahead and sketch out, that yeah, I'll go ahead and put this in black right here. But if you go ahead and just mark right through like a word like yeah, using a pencil tool right here. But that's anyway, but yeah, if you were to actually try to mark like I could probably do what I can probably do here, but anyway, but so yeah, if you were actually writing something down right here, and 102 is to word that you go ahead and start a conversation with somebody, but let's just say the original response that you were trying to write, but let's just say if you do start a new sentence right here, and let's just say that new sentence right there is going to include something like as to word that yeah, go ahead and change it right there to what, but you put on there is like yeah, what do you know now from or that or because, and so if I were to say something like yeah because so every time you think about that, and you're always thinking as to where that you can really can everybody else see can everybody else really see the answers from what you were trying to write down? Let's just say that if you were changing your mind about a certain answer, and let's just say that if you were to try to write down a certain response, right? Like so, yeah, what do you know now? And I can go ahead and highlight these words and give this a different color right here, just so that way we can kind of see that right there. Change that to yellow right here. So yeah, yellow is usually the color I give to it. So mainly, like if you would actually, like yeah, the curly bracket along with the parentheses or something like that. If you want to go ahead and change that to like a gold, like a little highlight yellow or something like that. So every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking it's that yeah, you'll go ahead and every time we do think about that wording in English, though, in English writing, and you're thinking as to where that yeah, that can you really turn a complete sentence into a complete question? And can you paraphrase that complete question into a simple answer? So it sure seems that way that if we, most English teachers, half the time you want to know too that a lot of times that you always want to know too that you could what's the proper name that you want to kind of give that to where that yeah, well from what you do know now that you didn't know from before, but before and after. So if you were to write that into a complete sentence, but still that it sure seems that way just a little bit that if you were to actually read this very clearly right here, to me it seems like to me that yeah, that you're trying to tie that into a question. You're trying to put a question right there, but you just don't know where the question mark is going to be placed. If you were to write a sentence like that, a complete sentence. So, I mean, I really don't know, like everybody else may say, the number of times that you were to try to write a complete sentence a lot of times, you're trying to fit that question mark in there somewhere, right? And so you're just trying to figure out where. So, right now that, you start out with what do you know, and then if you want to put like maybe I don't know, yeah, a comma right there or something like that, and and if you want to go ahead, maybe put a comma right at like, yeah, for that, and then you and I'm like, yeah, put on there, you and I or something like that, you and I, and so yeah, so it's like, so a lot of times that when we do think about that, a lot of times it seems like just a little bit that whenever you go ahead and write a complete sentence just like that right there in 102s toward it know now and from what you know, what you didn't know from then or something like that. So to me though, that's like, yeah, that just to kind of make the long story short, and like everybody else would say is toward it, yeah, just to kind of make the long story short. Yeah, long story short, and so yeah. Yeah, long story short. So to me, I really think that that's another way of how do you want to call it, as to where, long story short, I don't really have that kind of time really to explain all the details about, what I had to do and all that. So that's why it seems like that whenever you get into these conversations a lot of times with somebody, and let's just say that somebody's going to be asking the questions for sure, but it's like every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking this toward it, yeah, that you go ahead and have the conversations with somebody, but let's just say that you go ahead and start a conversation with somebody, right? And let's just say that, like, and yeah, well, I knew that. Well, I didn't know that, and so it's like, yeah, it kind of, just a little bit. That whenever you do start a conversation like that, it seems like that there's an argument. Like there's like a little back and forth conversation there, and there's also an argument that comes along with it, and along with it, yeah, that they're trying to get somebody to really to speak up about something, and so that is why it seems like that that every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking as toward it, that yeah, that really, while you're trying to talk, especially while you're trying to talk, somebody else is asking a question. They won't let you finish what you were trying to speak about. And so it's like, that's why it seems like that, like everybody else may say, is toward it, instead of asking your questions, by speech, you can go and just write them down so somebody can be able to read it first, and then you can go ahead and listen up to what the speaker has to say. And all that, so it's like, yeah, well, I can't see all that writing from what you're saying on the paper there, so that's why it seems like everybody else would say, that number of times that you've had conversations like this toward what do you know now that you didn't know from before, and so it's like, yeah, so it's like every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking as to where that the question mark has to go in that sentence somewhere. So it's like, really, that you think that maybe it'll make more sense to where that what do you know now, and if you were to put the question mark at about right here, like what to do, and then if you were to put a question mark like right there, I'm like, that would not really make any sense either. Like, what do, and then question mark you, and then like, let's just say that, yeah, if you were to put like maybe an exclamation, like, yeah, exclamation point, if anything, like anybody say, the exclamation point, if anything, would probably go after now, or something like that. But still, the exclamation point right there, and so yeah, so every time we think about that in 102, that typical text messaging, right? That you're always thinking as toward it. Whenever you do start writing a sentence, though, that don't you think that if anything, that you would like to at least start out the sentences toward it? What do you? What? And then yeah, and then from there you go ahead and put a comma right there, and then you go ahead and maybe attach right there is to where what corrected, or like, yeah, that, for, like, yeah, maybe a quote or something like that. A lot of people would probably say, yeah, instant reply or something like that. Yeah, reply or something like that. That's usually what I see right there, but still. So every time you think about any sort of complete sentence right there, and you're always thinking as to where that, yeah, some of the time too, but, every time I think about that, and I'm always thinking as to where that, you cannot finish, a lot of times. It's like, you have a listener, or maybe if you have somebody reading this, and a lot of times, it's like, yeah, you go ahead and start writing your sentence, but then you may think that there's somebody else who's looking at what you're writing, and maybe let's just say that they're going to go in and ask the question, or that, yeah, that, whenever you do start writing a complete sentence, it seems like that there's a question mark. It seems like there's always some sort of question about what you're trying to talk about and what you're trying to say. So it sure seems that way, that, like everybody else would say, is toward that, from what yeah, I know, or no, I didn't know that. And so it seems like that, yeah, the subheading. So look at this right here. Look at this right here is another way of how you want to start out the sentence with the heading right here. To where the, okay, yeah. You had two people that are communicating, right? One person knows information, and they're going to go and pass that information to the person with the knowledge, and so it's kind of like a back and forth conversation, right? But let's just say that maybe if there's 4 people joining the conversation, so it's like a lot of times it seems like that, you go ahead and start out the sentences by as toward that from what you know now and from what you didn't know from before, and before and after, and so that is why it seems like that, every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking as to where that, you really, that, it's really hard to be able to finish off what you were trying to say at the very beginning. Let's just say that the first thing, the first thing that you were trying to say, like everybody else would say, that if you want to go ahead and start a new line here just to show everybody what you were trying to say, but, yeah, what do you mean? What do you mean? So let's just say that, yeah, the person, what do you mean right here? And, yeah, well, what do you mean? So it's like every time you do write down a letter, let's just say if you do start writing, and let's just say if you're trying to leave somebody a message, leave somebody a note about something, right? And you're always thinking as to where, whoever that could be reading this message right here, you want to go ahead and just leave a message with them saying as to where, okay, yeah, that, I'm sure we've all been there, right, before, to where you're trying to write to somebody, and let's just say that, yeah, the things, the messages that maybe that they're not able to follow up with everything that you were trying to say from before, but let's just say that, yeah, what do you, like, yeah, what do you know now? And, so let's just say that, yeah, I know that, I knew all along, or something like that, and you can maybe say, yeah, I knew all along. I knew, yeah, I knew the whole time, yeah, I know, and, so it's like, yeah, I know, yeah, I know now, so yeah, so it's like every time you think about that, and you're always thinking as toward the time, for what I know, and then, for I have known. I had known, or something like that. So yeah, you can maybe say something like that. But what I guess you could say that, yeah. So it's like whenever you're writing a sentence like this right here in 102, is toward, yeah, like, and I can just say that, yeah, assume, assume, and so yeah, that's usually what I say too. That you assume something, and so every time you do start a conversation with somebody, and let's just say if it's with a cousin or somebody like that, and you're thinking as to where that yeah, that you start a conversation with somebody, but then they start telling you that okay, well I didn't know that or something like that. So yeah, so really, how are you, like everybody else might even say too, that really you are not really even you feel like you're not really too professional or too much of an expert whenever you keep saying that if you don't know something all the time. So like everybody says to where okay, well I didn't know that, like, and well really that well why didn't you know? And so that's why it seems like, I mean, that can be very frustrating whenever somebody, yeah, you trying to get some common sense about that. And like, yeah, what does common sense pretty much mean? Well, that means that, yeah, the common sense. Yeah, common sense. Common sense. And so whenever we do speak about common sense, it pretty much means is to where you're asking for somebody's opinion about something, right? You're asking for their feedback and their opinion about something. And most of the time, yeah, we might even say too that you're able to get a lot of good feedback from somebody about something, about what they think about this and what they think about that. You get some common sense, right? But a lot of times it's like every time you do think about that, and somebody's gonna maybe say this to her, okay, well, hey, I didn't know that, or I did not know that, or something like that. So they're gonna, somebody's gonna maybe say that, okay, well, I didn't know that. I didn't know, and so yeah, use comma right here. I didn't know, and so really that you don't really want to say something like that on the test scores. So like, let's just say that everybody else might even say that yeah, that if you're going to be taking any test or anything like that, for sure, they're going to ask you that really that your best guess is fine, but still, if you keep saying I don't know all the time, for sure, a lot of times test scores, they're not going to accept that for an answer. So I'm sure, like everybody else would say, is toward it, yeah, well, it's okay to guess, but really, that whenever you do guess, for sure, like everybody else, my teacher used to always say that, yeah, well, it's not really good to guess, but let's just say if you just had to guess just for assume for the better or something, but really though, if you're going to be writing a complete sentence, and let's just say that you go ahead and start writing down a sentence, right, just to try to, finish off that sentence just by to where that you go ahead and make a statement of something, and somebody else could be reading that, and you're like you say, is toward, yeah, well, really, that why can't you just add maybe these quotation marks or something like that? Or how come if there was somebody else that you were talking to, I'm like, yeah, there's really another way of how you can do that, but it's like nowadays it sure seems that way, that instead of saying something like, well, I didn't know, or something like that, but everybody else might say is toward it, maybe the best way of how to go ahead and put this into a complete sentence for sure will be is toward it, yeah, that you go ahead and like, yeah, if this right here is supposed to be like a sentence toward it, yeah, a quote, quote from somebody says this, so you go ahead and yeah, paraphrase it and also rewrite it, from what somebody said from earlier, and I know that there's the sorts of keywords that you would use for something like that. But it's like, yeah, so I actually see this type of skill right here used mainly for, like, if you're going to be reading somebody's papers, or maybe if it is if you're trying to write, if you're trying to speak up, from somebody like, somebody in your own words, somebody referenced you to go ahead and write a paper, or speech, or a statement about something, and but let's just say that the sentence right here was related to the conversation that you had earlier with this person, and so like let's just say that if you were talking to them maybe on Zoom call or something like that, or even on Skype call, and thinking too that just to kind of recap of what you were talking about from earlier, the things that you were talking about, and so it's like so every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking as to where that you go ahead, and I'm like, you go ahead and paint this picture right here, especially with the tongue sticking out right here, and thinking too as to where, okay, well, what is that supposed to mean right there? Okay, you two people right there, with the tongue sticking out right there, and so what does all that mean right there? The person right there that the painting right there, that's supposed to be somebody that you were talking to at some point in time, and so it's like, with the tongue sticking out. What does that mean whenever somebody has their tongue sticking out? And you're probably thinking, well, really, what does that mean whenever you have your tongue sticking out like that? And people may say, it usually means that they're happy. It usually means that they're happy, or joyful, or something like that. But everybody else might say is to where, that they're on vacation or something like that. That they actually got what they've been waiting to get or something like that. So it's like, it's like a joyful type. But let's just say that, everybody else might say that, whenever you do start a conversation with somebody, and let's just say if it is a virtual conversation with somebody, and at 102 that, that you go ahead and start a conversation with somebody, and thinking as to where they're going to maybe say something like, we met once before, or we're cousins actually, we're cousins, and or we are related somehow, or something like that, or that I actually came across one of the sources of work that you were doing from earlier, or something like that. So every time we do think about a conversation, something like this, and you 102 that, so it's like every time you think about any source of conversation, really, that you go ahead and start the conversation by stating to where that, what do you know now from what you didn't know from before? So it's like, you go ahead and start that conversation, and what you basically are doing is to where that you're trying to give this person a clue of what exactly is it, from what you were able to work with from at the beginning, from what you have now. But to me, I just look at that to more as to where that right there, if you were to actually try to write a complete sentence, and any source of the type of writing, right? If you were to actually write a complete sentence, so really, what is one key factor to remember about that whenever we talk about for you're writing a complete sentence, but at the same time you want to go ahead and ask the questions at the same time. So a number of times, based on my experience, a number of times it's happened before. It's like, you go ahead and ask the questions, but at the same time, you go ahead and you see these questions coming up right here. You go ahead, and if you want to change the color to that question mark right there, to maybe change that to a green, such as toward you get a response about your question within within maybe 10 minutes between time. This next question right here, you got that response within 5 hours timing or something like that. I mean, I really don't know, everybody. I really don't know, but let's just say that, if you were to be asking the questions for sure, it's all measured by the categories, right? But if you only give it maybe a red or something like that, but still. So if you were to actually look at this like a question mark right here, and 102, that yeah, that question that you asked from earlier, right? That question that you asked from earlier, that you thought that it would maybe be, you thought that it would maybe take up to 5 hours before you got a response from that question from earlier. So it's like every time you do think about that, the type of study of psychology, right? And you're always 102 you're always 102 that if you were to be writing a question, even on a greeting card, especially even on a greeting card, that you're always warned for that sometimes that you're able to get a few responses from any questions that you had from earlier, sometimes within 5 hours timing, or sometimes within maybe within minutes timing, that you're able to get a response from somebody. And so it's like, yeah, perfect timing, right? For perfect timing. And so if we were to actually think about that, for perfect timing, right? And so it's like every time you think about that, and you're always thinking as to where that, okay, yeah, perfect timing. And so whenever you do ask whenever you ask the question a lot of times, and you're thinking as to where, okay, yeah, that according to that the email from earlier, that it said on there that according to that email that you got from earlier, it said on there that it would maybe take about up to 8 hours before you could get a response from that person that you were asking the question about, right? And perfect timing. And yeah, so it's like, yeah, so every time you do think about that, and you're thinking as to where, yeah, you go ahead and ask the questions a lot of times, and I can go and just highlight this like if I was, but still, perfect timing. So it's like, yeah, so it's like perfect time meaning is to where while you're asking the questions, and let's just say if it was a question from earlier, that yeah, you get a response within maybe 10 minutes or so. It was a lot sooner than maybe what you expected, and so it's like, yeah, everybody else might say that whenever you had these meetings with somebody, this somebody could be a doctor, this somebody could be a specialist, and you're thinking too that yeah, you were trying to write that sentence in a way to where that you were trying to make it a little bit more clear for this reader to understand, but at the same time that there were questions being instated, to where I'm sorry to interrupt, but I got a question for you. And so I really just want to know too that whenever we do speak about a lot of conversations, for the most part, that with most of these conversations, right, and you're always thinking as to where that really that why can't questions come after the complete sentence instead of somewhere somehow that question mark is going to be placed somewhere in that sentence right there. And it's like, yeah, so it's like whenever you do start a complete sentence for sure, and everybody else might say that, yeah, complete sentence, and I can go ahead and start a separate line here so we can see this right here. But let's just say that if the question also goes by as to where that, I know for sure. Yeah, I know for sure. And so yeah, so it's like, so if you start a sentence like that, and like everybody, yeah, put a period at the end right there. I know for sure. So is that a complete sentence right there? Yeah, I know for sure. Everybody has to say that, well, that's really, it's kind of short, and, does that really give you any information on what's needed, based on what somebody was asking about? And, I know for sure, and, yeah, so if you're going to be talking to anybody, even on Instagram or even on Messenger, and you want to know too that on Facebook that you're probably thinking that yeah, whenever you're going to be getting into these conversations with anybody, really, I know for sure, and really, how if you can maybe ask those questions toward it, really, what is really a complete sentence, and for sure that that some of those sentences are not really written very clearly unless that there's supposed to be a response from somebody's question from earlier, or maybe if you were reading to somebody, or maybe corresponding to somebody or something like that. So it's like every time you do think about the English language, for sure, it seems like that, that there's different writing formats, but it sure seems that way, that whenever you first start writing something, what you really are trying to do is that you're just trying to get you're trying to think of a scenario and a conclusion and reflection about what you're trying to write about, right? Summarizing, and then also kind of trying to get some feedback, about what your writers are thinking and all that, but a lot of times it seems like that every time I think about it, it's like, that why is it that maybe somebody's trying to fit a question right here, and let's just say that every time you think about that, you go ahead and maybe put like maybe a curly bracket or something like that, or a parenthesis marks or something like that right here in these sentences right here. So like, let's just say that, what do, or, that's you, and then, so if I were to put right here, if I were to put right here maybe a parenthesis or something like that, and I don't really think that would, that I don't think that that's no purpose to do that, but it's like every time you do think about that in 102, that those keywords, that they don't go there unless if we're talking about that, if we're talking about typical HTML writing language or something like that. But everybody else might say that, whenever you're going to be communicating with somebody, for sure, that what you would want to go ahead and write on there will be is to where that, maybe like a greeting. Put like a greeting right here, like an hello or something like that. Put a greeting right there, and so it's like, every time I think about that, it's like, put a greeting or something like that, like hello, and hello, and well, hello. That's usually what I do. So it's like, so if you were to say, well, hello, what does that mean? Well, I don't even know you. Well, hello. I know it. Well, hello, and so anybody who's going to be more willing to happy to join the conversation, for sure, I am sure that they're going to say is toward if they're able to connect with you, even on chat or something like that, even on Snapchat, and they're going to maybe say that, I came across your profile and I thought I'd go ahead and join the conversation or something like that, but really, that every time you do think about that, and you're always second as to where, I'm trying to finish my statement here before you go ahead and ask the question, but it's like every time you do think about that in 102, that anything that you were talking about from earlier, do you think that it would make more sense to go ahead and write down anything that you want to talk about, and then you can go ahead and let the person read about it, and so it's like every time you do think about having meetings like that, and you're thinking as to where to really, what's the best solution for that, to where you go ahead and write one complete sentence right here, but then also at the same time somebody's going to ask the question. But it's like, I guess that the fact of the matter is knowing as to where you get the idea about this, but still, it's like, from what you know now, from what you didn't know from before. And so that's why it seems like, talk about for the tongue sticking out, and know about it's like, I remember having that conversation, and so every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking as to where that you have conversations with somebody, and the first thing that they're going to say is to where that I would like to meet this person in person. I would like to have this conversation in person so I can get a better idea of what we were talking about from earlier. And yeah, we met once, and so that's why it seems like every time you think about that, is that there was one time where you met virtually until you actually were able to work that out, where you were able to meet them in person. And so yeah, so it's like so every time you think about that, and you're thinking this toward it, yeah, that the way things have been going now, and it's like, yeah, so it's like so every time you think about that, you just trying to look back and realize. You look back and realize. You try to realize about to summarize about all the activity that's been going on, and you're always thinking as to where that, yeah, do you really ask the question as to where that do you know now, or yeah, I know, and so it's like, yeah, it's kind of like a back and forth conversation, right? But in a lot of ways, it sure seems that way. That every time you think about that, and you're always thinking as to where that yeah, that you won't know unless if you ask the questions. But every time you think about that, it's like it seems like that's just using more time. Every time somebody asks the same questions over and over, it seems like it's just using more time. And so that's why it seems like really what is the best situation of how to solve that. And like everybody else will say is to where they really that you have these conversations a lot of times, but it's like, yeah, just to summarize it, but still back and forth conversations, but still, do you think that really it's really all about the fact about giving good point of perspective and knowledge? And so that's usually what I would think about, and talk about for perfect timing. But anyway, the way I think about it too, that I also say too that whenever it comes to understanding about from what you know now, and then from what somebody that didn't know, so it's like, yeah, so every time you think about that, and you're always thinking as toward, yeah, I know, yeah, well, how come you didn't tell me? And so a lot of times it's like, yeah, so every time you do start a complete sentence a lot of times, and it's like, yeah, so it's like, so all this right here is supposed to be like any sort of clue or something like that, about the conversation or something like that. So a lot of times it's like, yeah, so every time you think about that, it seems like to me just a little bit. Like if you were to actually write that on a Hallmark card or any sort of greeting card for sure, then maybe somebody's going to say is toward, give me some common sense here. What did you mean about this from what you said earlier? Like, well, I was just saying hello or something like that. Well, hello. And so yeah, so every time you do think about that, and you're always thinking as toward it, yeah, that number one, that well, I didn't know that. Well, do you know now? Yeah, well, I know now. Or yeah, I think I can kind of guess what the situation is, et cetera, et cetera. But so that's stuff to think about, right? But anyway, but talk about for assume, right? But to make the long story short right here, but every time I think about that, and I'm always thinking this to where, based on my experience, that it's like, yeah, you go ahead and put these quotation marks and all that, but it's like everybody else would say is to where that, yeah, that you would really only need to include like the quotation marks and parentheses, right there, if you were trying to respond to somebody's question from earlier, or if you were trying to start a new sentence or something like that, in the complete sentence, or maybe start a new line or something like that somewhere. But really, if you were to actually be writing a paper about something like this, for sure, that they'll tell you that within up to 500 or so characters long, that they summarize and of course include a few quotes and all that. But really, that I really just think that just for something to really be easier to understand, for good feedback though. But it's like number of times that I've tried, it sure seems that way. That are you able to learn a lot? yeah, are you able to learn a lot the more you read? And so it's like, are you able to learn? You able to learn? Yeah, you learned a lot. Yeah, you learned a lot, just by all that reading. So it's like, so let's just say that there's a document that you were reading, right? And let's just say that if it was 500 sentences long right here. And so every time you think about that in the 102, that 500, it was 500 sentences. Yeah, 500 sentences right there. And so every time you think about that, and you're always thinking as to where, really, who has time to read all that? I don't have time to read that part, but I'm just going to go and just read this part right here. So I'm sure we've all been there to where that if you were having to read and write something, for sure, nobody has time to look at 500 sentences of something that you were trying to read and follow up with from earlier. But if you were to try to make that into a short phrase, and let's just say that within one complete sentence, and you go ahead and just write it at about right here, do you think anybody's going to really understand what you were talking about from earlier? And that is why it seems like that, just to kind of summarize and quote what you were talking about from earlier, that, typical words in a dictionary, right? But, I just really think in a lot of ways that, people might say you just really have to be familiar with it and be experienced with it, right? But top up for perfect timing. But, and I just really think that's really what it is. Anyway, thanks for watching, everyone, and hopefully there's some good knowledge right there. But top up for 500 sentences. But yeah, top up for we met once before, and so any source of conversation that you do have with somebody at some point, for sure that they're going to say is to what all that you know now that you didn't know from before. And like I say, yeah, well, what I know now is that there's a lot more questions about something. Every time I talk about something, somebody's going to have a question about something, or they don't quite understand something. And so that is why it seems like that, somebody's going to be anxious to know about something. And that's why it seems like that, whenever you do start a conversation, that somebody's going to need is going to request more of your time about more information or something like that. But it sure seems that way, that every time you do start a conversation, that do you believe that there's enough information being provided, if there's equal information being provided? And you think about from before and after, and people might say is to where that, do you believe that the job is getting done whenever you go ahead and have these conversations? And everybody say that, well, sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, but one thing that we can keep in mind is talk about for perfect time, right? And but at the same time, it's like, yeah, you learned a lot while you were working on that. But the way I think about it, though, is like, yeah, like everybody say, is to where that from all the information from what you know now that you didn't know from before, and at 102 is to where it really, why does it seem so hard from before, and why does it seem so easier now? And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact about, so much information that was on higher demand than from what it was before. So whenever, I'm like, yeah, so like every time you do think about that, and 102 is toward it, that whenever you do think about that, then what I say is toward it, yeah, whenever it comes to top up for common sense, right? Anyway, yeah, thanks for watching, everyone, and have a great day.